Welcome, students, to today's lesson about the regions of the United States. Today we're going to learn about the Western region. We're going to begin by looking at the physical geography and learn about some of the natural resources in the Western region. Now, the Western region covers the western half of the United States. It includes Montana, Wyoming, Colorado, New Mexico, Arizona, Utah, Idaho, Washington, Oregon, Nevada, California, Alaska, Hawaii, and several territories, including Guam. It's often divided up into a couple sections. This lower section here is often called the Southwest, and this upper section here is often called the Northwest. This is usually referred to as the Pacific coast here along the Pacific Ocean. Notice that Alaska in reality is much larger than this. It's just scaled down to fit on the map easily. And that Hawaii is not located over here in reality. Hawaii is way off over here in the Pacific Ocean. Several mountain ranges cover much of the West. The largest mountain range is the Rocky Mountains, which form the eastern edge of the region. The Rockies begin far to the north in Canada, and from there they stretch all the way down to Mexico through Montana, Idaho, Wyoming, and Colorado. The Rocky Mountain Range is nearly 3,000 miles long and hundreds of miles wide. Other mountain ranges that run north and south along the Pacific coast are called the Coast Ranges. The Coast Ranges form a long line on the western edge of the United States. These mountains seem to rise right up out of the Pacific Ocean and form cliffs in many places along the coast, all the way up to Alaska. The highest mountain in the United States, Mount Denali, is part of the Coast Range. Mount Denali in Alaska is 20,320 feet high. These mountains are full of minerals, an important natural resource that humans use to make things. Those minerals were created in ancient volcanoes. There are still some active volcanoes in the region. Volcanic eruptions happen, but not too often. These volcanoes are all part of a ring of volcanoes that stretch around the Pacific Ocean. These volcanoes can be found on the west coast and in Hawaii. A famous eruption happened in 1980 when Mount St. Helens erupted explosively. The eruption destroyed 215 square miles of forest. The Sierra Nevada Mountains and the Cascade Mountains form a second line on the west coast. These two ranges are very different from each other. The Sierra Nevadas were formed when pieces of the Earth's crust collided together and forced upward to make mountains. The rocks of the Cascade Mountains are the remains of ancient magma chambers that fed volcanoes and then eroded away. Between the mountain ranges lie several valleys. Two of the valleys, Central Valley and Willamette Valley, are covered with deep, rich soil. Many rivers travel through these two valleys. The western region is also home to the Great Deserts of the U.S. The Great Basin lies in the middle of Flat Valley of the West region. A basin is a low, bowl-shaped landform that's lower than the land around it. The broad, flat valley of the Great Basin is mostly covered by the Great Basin Desert and the Mojave Desert. The Great Basin Desert is the largest in the United States. Death Valley, part of the Mojave Desert, is the hottest, driest, and lowest place in the United States. The highest temperature ever recorded in Death Valley was 134 degrees. These deserts get tremendous amounts of sunlight and heat. Believe it or not, the western region also has rainforests. The rainforest that runs along the Pacific coast from California to Alaska is the largest temperate rainforest in the world. Temperate rainforests are very wet, ancient forests that rarely freeze or get very hot. Temperate rainforests are also close to the ocean, where the ocean mist feed gigantic forests all year long. Some of the large trees, such as the giant redwoods or the Sitka spruce and western hemlock, reach over 300 feet high and live over 500 years. The Great Salt Lake is one of the largest in the U.S. The Great Salt Lake is about 75 miles long and 35 miles wide, but it is very shallow. Most of the lake is only 3 feet deep. Unlike most lakes, the Great Salt Lake is full of salty water, even saltier than the ocean, because several rivers flow into it, but no water flows out. When the water evaporates, salt is left behind. It's too salty for fish. The salt's not pure enough for humans to eat, but it can be used for things like de-icing the roads, like here in Minnesota. The only animals that live in the lake are tiny brine shrimp. Although they're tiny, the brine shrimp are an important food source for millions of birds that live around the lake. Alaska and Hawaii are far apart from other states, and they're very different from each other. Much of Alaska is tundra. That means it's largely frozen over for most of the year. Hawaii, on the other hand, is made up of 8 main islands. The islands were made long ago by volcanoes that rose up out of the Pacific Ocean. 2 of those volcanoes are still active today. The valleys of the West carry great rivers. And we're going to talk here just a little bit about some of the natural resources and the products that we create from those natural resources. The Columbia River is very important to the Western region. Dams on that river help to make a lot of electricity. The rivers are also a great resource of water for farmers to get water for their farms, to irrigate their farms. And the Columbia River water irrigates more than 8 million acres of land. That means that the water goes to 8 million acres of land. Now, we also build dams on these rivers, and we use those dams to generate electricity. This resource benefits us because many homes and businesses use this electric power to operate, and water is diverted to farmers to irrigate crops. It's a benefit. That means it's a plus for us. That's a good thing. But there's an environmental cost to building these dams because it disrupts natural habitats for fish and river ecosystems. Soil is another important resource. In the Central Valley and the Willamette Valley, they have fantastic soil, allowing them to grow many fruits and vegetables like apricots, almonds, strawberries, cabbage, lettuce, tomatoes, grapes, avocados, asparagus, cotton, and corn. Potatoes, green beans, onions, and broccoli are all grown there. Washington's best known for its apples. They produce more apples than any other state. Hawaii is also a source of abundant farming. It's famous for its pineapples. You can also find sugarcane in Hawaii that's grown in a type of farm called a plantation, which you see here. Once it's harvested, that sugar cane is sent to sugar mills, and that's where the table sugar that we use is produced. Bananas, rice, and coffee, and macadamia nuts are also grown in Hawaii. Well, these resources benefit us because they provide food for millions of people. But there is an environmental cost because the pesticides and herbicides used to grow the food can be harmful to workers in the field and harmful to people that might consume them. Remember those rainforests that run up and down the coast? They're home to some of the greatest expanses of forest in the country, so the West region is the center of the wood products industry. Wood products include lumber and plywood and cardboard and paper. Much of the wood used in the United States comes from the Western region. These resources benefit us because that wood is used to build houses and furniture and musical instruments and much more. There is an environmental cost, though, because cutting down forests can endanger habitat for animals and plants. Now remember those Rocky Mountains we were talking about? They are a source of many minerals. Deposits of copper, gold, silver, and many other valuable resources have been found within those mountains. The famous California gold rush of 1848 attracted tens of thousands of people to the West in search of riches, but they didn't actually find much gold. What they did find was lead and silver. Other valuable minerals were found in the area as well. One of them is molybdenum. Molybdenum is used in the production of high-strength steel. Another is uranium, used to generate nuclear power, and lithium, used to make batteries for tablets and electric cars. To get these resources, we build mines. One type of mining is called mountaintop removal. The tops of mountains are removed to get at the minerals. Another type of mining is called pit mining. Giant holes are dug and resources are extracted. And another type of mining is called hydraulic mining, which uses water to wash away the land around the minerals. We use these resources to make things like steel. And that steel can be used to make aircraft. The most famous airplane company is located in the Western region. It's called Boeing, and Boeing makes most of the airplanes and spacecraft that we use to fly in the United States. That steel is also used to build ships. Fishing boats, tankers, and even battleships are made in Washington and Hawaii. Mining benefits us because these minerals are used to construct buildings and transportation and to make and power electric devices that we all enjoy, as well as the electric vehicles of the future. There is an environmental cost because getting at these minerals destroys natural habitats. Another abundant resource in the West is oil and natural gas, which are pumped from the ground. This resource benefits us because oil is used to make the gasoline that most cars use to drive. Most of the cars in the U.S. right now use gasoline to drive, and most of the homes in the U.S. use natural gas to stay warm. There's an environmental cost because oil and natural gas are major pollutants, and burning them in cars and to heat homes is a major cause of climate change. The Western region is also a leader in collecting solar energy. Solar energy is collected from the sun. In 2019, California reported a total of 27,400 megawatts of solar capacity, making up 20% of all electricity produced in the state, powering 7.7 million homes. But it's still just a fraction of the power needed to power all of the homes. The West is also a major source of wind power, especially in the states of California and Texas, generating enough electricity for hundreds of thousands of houses each year. These resources benefit us because you can collect energy from the sun and wind to make electricity without emitting greenhouse gases. Of course, there's an environmental cost because to build these wind turbines and solar panels, resources need to be mined from the ground, and we still need a lot more of them to generate enough power for our country. Well, that's just a little bit about the physical geography and some of the natural resources in the United States. Today, you are going to identify some of the physical geography of the U.S. and some of the natural resources that we benefit from and some of the environmental costs of using those resources. Have fun with this work. Make sure to let us know if you have any questions, and we can't wait to see what you create.